happy Friday, everybody. It is a beautiful day. Not really. We're in Michigan. It's overcast, but it is a holiday weekend, and we are excited for it. I know Jeff's excited for it. Jeff, you excited for a 3-day weekend?
Yeah. Oh, man, how come I always do that?
It's always the opposite.
It's always the opposite.
Boop.
Yeah,
Boop,
I'm
boop,
excited.
boop.
I've got 3 days to cut grass.
And with your lawn, it probably will take you 3 days.
I forgot. That's why you paused. You didn't know what I was saying. I'm going to mow the lawn.
Yeah. Cutting grass? What is that, hillbilly talk?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. Here. But you just had some good time off.
Yes.
A little bit of a break. Just returned recently.
Yeah.
And now you got more.
Took four weeks to welcome a newborn.
Welcome.
So,
that you helped create. Part of you. Yeah.
I was referring to it as family leave, even though all I got was 1 week of real family leave, and the rest was using my own time. But
yeah.
Several folks refer to it as vacation.
Oh, good.
And I feel like they must have fun vacations.
Yeah. Well, you should have just correct them each time and say, no, I'd like you to refer to it as playing hooky. I was playing hooky, like Huckleberry Finn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
that's good.
yeah. Congratulations to you for having leave. And whatever whatever situation spurred the leave.
Yes. Let's be cryptic. It makes for good content.
Yes. Congratulations to you and or anyone else in your domicile who is impacted by this leave.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Hey, we were talking about air fryers earlier.
Yeah.
I've been eating a brat and a cup of fruit at 5 a.m. every morning for the last 2 weeks. And I've cooked the brat in an air fryer. And
I cook everything in air fryers.
I think the air fryer is the best way to cook brats. I've spent hours just simmering them in beer and then finishing them on we got a Blackstone griddle in the back. And it's not worth the time. 15 minutes at 400, throw it in the air fryer, you're good to go.
That's right. You never have to clean an air fryer.
I never thought I'd be eating brats at 5 a.m. consistently for 2 weeks.
It's like sausage. It's just like sausage, you know? Who cares? It's good for you. If you don't clean your air fryer, that's also good for you. Builds up character.
You're not supposed to clean them, right? You're supposed
to
let them go.
Depends on who you ask.
And then you throw them out, and you get a new one, and then they end up like on an island in the South Pacific.
Yeah, there's going to be some sort of a landfill somewhere in 15 years that is just full of air fryers and No Fear T-shirts from the late 90s, because those all went somewhere.
And George Foreman's right in the middle of them.
Oh yeah, I've gone through several of those babies.
Do they make those anymore, or do they just make air fryers?
Yeah. Oh no, they make them. They make big. Here's how full circle it's become. The original George Foreman grill was built to be the anti-grill, right? It's electric, it's small, it's on your countertop, and now they've got big outdoor versions that like sit on like legs, and it's like you've become what you hate, George Foreman.
They were for dorm rooms. Is what they were for.
Dorm rooms, bachelors, anything. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of
in the car.
Yeah. I was gonna say speaking of bachelors, but I don't know what that is. Listen, we have had this podcast for a little over 4 years now. And throughout that 4 years, one topic has come up more than any others, more than the 1980s Detroit Piston Bad Boys team. That comes up a lot. But what comes up more is the topic of Pete Davidson. And peppered throughout our 27, 28 episodes, he's come up. And, me being a big SNL fan, I've had some words that I've shared about him. Haven't really cared for him. And Jeff has always kind of, I don't know if you've been defensive of him, but I think you've been more curious about why I had such a negative attitude towards him. So we figured with him being, this past week was the finale of SNL, and his last appearance. He has retired from SNL after 9 years and moving on. So we thought this would be a good time to circle back and revisit this conversation and kind of update it and see where we are right now. We've got some clips. So I'm going to play for you some clips just for some context of the previous conversation that we've had. And Jeff, anything you wanna add to that before we go into the clip?
Nope.
Let's roll it. Okay, we're gonna roll this clip, and then we're gonna tie it all together.
Very awkward, yeah. Much like Pete Davidson, don't care for him. He's like young Adam Sandler without any of the charm. Like Adam Sandler was really, had some similar sensibilities, but he was charming about it. And Pete Davidson does the same kinds of stupid things. He's Adam Sandler without the redeeming qualities.
So Adam Sandler, when I think of him, potty humor, but like lovable loser kind of mentality. Do you have the same perception of him?
This is a guy who he has these threads of old people are cute, and he, a young, at the time, late 20s, early 30s, punk who beats up people with hockey sticks, but also really, really loves their grandma and will do anything for their grandma. So I think there is a lot of heart to all of the poop humor and the nonsense that Adam Sandler does that Pete Davidson does not yet have. And I think that's the difference.
I like that you said yet. And I feel like this will be our Jimmy Kimmel, Matt Damon thing. Let's just keep on having B-roll stuff about Pete Davidson. Until we finally get to an episode where we talk about Pete Davidson and me making you like him.
If we get to episode 100,
yeah,
and Pete Davidson is still famous, I would be very surprised.
Okay.
I think he's on the way out.
So Pete Davidson will be episode 100 if he's still relevant.
If he's still relevant, and not working at a Kmart.
Like now, when someone is over someone,
yeah,
you can say thank you next, right?
Yep.
And it's out of context a little bit of what the actual overall song is supposed to be about,
sure.
But that's what you do. You just grab the title.
Yeah. Well, much like Ariana Grande, I'm over Pete Davidson, so I can say thank you next. I was never under him, so I guess that doesn't hold any water.
I was surprised to hear that Lorne Michaels doesn't like his tattoos.
I have to agree with him. You know why? Because if you are in a show that is predicated on you playing multiple different characters in the same night, you don't want the same damn giant black heart tattoo on the side of your neck in every single character you're going to be. Like, you can't play Barack Obama and have face tattoos, So you got to cover them up.
That's true.
That costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time to do that tattoo cover-up.
Especially since SNL is one of the last, live performance, you can't just let CGI get it, right?
Yeah.
Because in most cases, you don't have to put on weight anymore, like to play a fat person,
right,
in a movie, because they can just put it on you.
Put it on me, like Ja Rule.
All right, well, great Ja Rule reference, if I do say so myself. Always good to have.
Did we really only bring up Pete Davidson twice?
You know, I could. So I was going back through, and I was using the cues from the descriptions of each episode, to locate them and find them. So those were the lengthiest discussions we had about him. However, there are other places I'm certain that a little reference was dropped or whatnot. But I wasn't going to listen to 30 hours worth of content in order to find all of those. So, and I didn't want to bore people rehashing the past. That really kind of encapsulates, I think, the nature of the discussion. I as someone who is a long time, multi-decade watcher of SNL, being obsessed with it, growing up with it, I really hated his cavalier attitude towards being in sketches and stuff like that, and he's always like the same guy in sketches, right? He wouldn't do characters, and it almost felt like he was too cool to do those kinds of things. To the very job he was hired for, it felt as though he was kind of just too cool for school, But I think over the past, so that's setting up the context for where we've started, and I think over the past couple of months, as his name has come up, quite a bit in social media and news articles and everything like that, and then I'm like kind of seeing them, and then I'm sending them to you, and you're sending me messages back being like, I don't know that I really need to make you like him anymore, because it sounds like you're kind of like coming around on your own. So I wanted to unpackage that a little bit. But first, I'm curious. You've always kind of been, it felt like, in defense of Pete Davidson, and anytime I would bring up like the reasons why I don't like him, you'd be like, "What? Tell me more about that," and trying to dig into it. And maybe I'm projecting, but it kind of felt like you were in defense of him. Like, is that an accurate statement, or were you really just trying to get at what was causing this strong reaction in me, or was it because you saw something in him that you were like wanting to be defensive of?
I think I was more surprised than maybe defensive, but defense. I think it's fair to say I was defensive of him. I live in my own space and a little bit, but I've always found him to be likable. I've not found him to be perfect. Matter of fact, I think that the biggest loss, if we're looking at it, I think looking at Pete Davidson the person, Pete Davidson as a just as an individual performer and the skill set that he brings. And then you can also, a third column there is, how is he as a player on SNL, right? And I think that where you gravitate to as a longtime SNL fan is that the art, like the cast, the sketches leads, right? That's what leads, and those that do their part well in that space, that's how you're going to evaluate them. Whether they're a supernova that a sketch can just be built around, like Chris Farley, and the talent's undeniable, or you're talking about glue cast members that tend to be able to fit in and move sketches along. Like, we could have a conversation about, like, Mikey Day's in a lot of sketches. Mikey Day's not, like, doesn't stand out as, like, a star.
He's nobody's favorite character. He's nobody's favorite cast member.
But he does a lot to move sketches along, right? He
does, for sure.
He does his part, and I think that when you're talking, your critique of Pete Davidson, in the way it stuck with me, because I think you characterize him as unwilling to do the job, like do a job, right? Like if you're, there was a particular sketch where there was a bunk bed scene. Do you remember
Yeah.
this
Mm-hmm.
one? And
I remember.
you just felt like he wasn't committed, and I think that's a fair critique of
Yeah.
of his performance there.
Yeah, I think it was like a kid's sleepover, and all the other people are like, oh, Dad, we're gonna have some ice cream and some, or whatever the case may be, and then he was in like children's clothes, and he was like, yeah, so okay, what do we do now? And he's just himself in every sketch. That was my critique. Yes, that was a lot of my concern. Is like, you have been blessed with the opportunity to be on this institution, this multi-generational institution, and you're too good for it. That was at least my impression.
Yeah.
So
I tend to and I don't know what I have a harder time. I learn a lot from you, from like how you described like these different parts and these different themes that like cut across sketches, and just like the performances that we see. And I've learned a lot from you with that. I tend to like look within the performances and see like things I like from what individuals do. So like James Austin Johnson seems to be like, if you close your eyes, especially, can turn into anyone. And so like from an impression standpoint, that just shines through.
oh, for sure.
And I think impressions have always had their place on SNL, and there's different eras of like the cast not trying to look like a character at all, or even sound like them, and just like doing their thing. Into I think more modern, especially like the previous 2 decades, it's been like, let's use prosthetics, and let's do wardrobe, and let's get this to do to go as well as it can. But a good impression's always had its place. Now when folks have like those unique things, they try to like set up opportunities for cast members to shine. I think that I've always objected to your assertion that Pete Davidson thinks he's too cool for things, because his work at the update desk is like complete self-deprecating like humor, like
For sure.
the way that he like he makes fun of a lot of people at that update desk, but it always includes him living with his mom, or bringing up his mental illness, which I also think, like, as a person, being like just an imperfect I'll say advocate for mental health, and,
Yeah.
and being vulnerable in that space is something that I would say is that he brings real value to.
Absolutely.
I like when people are themselves and they show up as themselves. I also like I like what Mikey Day does, in that you don't think about Mikey Day, and Mikey Day helps to make sketches really great.
Yes, he serves the show, for sure.
If we were sitting here and like we're talking about Pete, and we're bringing Pete on this episode because we've talked about Pete in the past, but also there's some significant cast members leaving. If you're asking me what I think the biggest loss is, it's A.D. Bryant.
Yeah.
To SNL. If it's like people that I really enjoy, just like Pete reminds me of my brother. Pete reminds me of I've got friends that have parts of Pete Davidson in them. That you described him kind of like a poor man's Adam Sandler. I think there's like an everyman quality to Pete. There's a willingness to just for those that enjoy just like the most grotesque, like we'll call it potty humor, like that, to go to the limit and then like play around there with like those are, you've always talked about those being easy, like that's an easy place to go to get laughs.
Yeah.
I think the way I would describe Pete is that he goes to the easy spots and then he gets detailed, and detail is where humor is. And
Sure.
I think sometimes he lingers there so long that it starts off as basic, and his ability to stay in that thread for a period of time is where the humor comes from. There's some timing parts of his. It's not all about. He's not the best. He's not the best punchline artist. He's not. He's not even like his musical sketches. Like the one with Lorne was actually in the last in the Eminem saga was probably his worst, and I would say all of them like were not executed that well.
Yeah.
He's an imperfect SNL character or cast member. He's not the best of his leading class, but he's unique.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to I don't have a cast member that I dislike, so that's saying something.
Yeah.
But I'll end with this. How if I had one of the most famous hip hop artists in the world like making music videos of decapitating me, because I was because I was with his ex-wife, I wish that I could show up the way that Pete Davidson has shown up throughout this experience. He could have gone a lot of different ways, but I think he's really good with relationships, not ones that last necessarily, but he's not one that breaks up and it seems to be this huge toxic whatever that we see. Even with the partners that he's been with have been in relationships that have ended really, really poorly, right?
Yeah.
Ariana Grande goes from Mac Miller to Pete Davidson. Kim Kardashian goes from Kanye to Pete Davidson. In there, who else was he dating in between those relationships?
Kate Beckinsale, models that I'm not really familiar with. Lots of beautiful women. I think Larry David's daughter was in there at one point or another.
And I don't see him publicly showing out either, right? Like, necessarily.
I think due to the nature of his, and especially the most recent one, paparazzi seem to be really focused on that family and anything that they do. So put those two together, and it's sort of like a circus, in terms of TMZ types trying to get part of it. Does he ask for that or want that? I would guess probably not, but it's just a nature of just the high profileness of, and when you throw Kanye in there, this sort of like public beef playing out, there's a lot of interest in him. So he has been like sort of front and center, in a lot of things.
Something I just thought of. It's not the skill set that's the comparison. It's the how Pete fits with SNL and the cast. A little like Jay Farrow vibes, a little bit. Like I think a special personality, a different skill set, maybe doesn't like fit into the sketch game too well, but can kind of shines or like has their creates their own lane and has a place. And I don't know if any other, I talked about Chris Farley. I think Chris Farley is different in the sense that like Chris Farley is like the supernova category, doesn't fit in, and that's similar, but brings the entire show to them. Where I don't feel like those two, and Jay Farrow, to be fair, I don't know as I don't have as good a memory to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if Adam Sandler was like that. Like I think Adam Sandler seemed to be in a lot of like just going on the field test and not really going through all the sketches in detail. Adam Sandler was a good player. Andy Samberg had like his own lane with Lonely Island, and like his niche became like those musical sketches, right?
The shorts, yeah. The digital shorts. I think they really solidified that as a mainstay of the show, something that people would look forward to. And when Lonely Island, when that whole crew joined SNL, that was really just as YouTube was getting up and running, and having that component the Monday morning after the show aired on Saturday, and then people emailing it to each other, sharing it, and stuff like that, really took SNL in a different direction of like this part of the zeitgeist, that part of the something you want to share. And then they started loading their rich history of stuff to their YouTube channel, because they're like, okay, well, we got a gold mine here. People want to see this stuff, and you just want to type it in and have access to it. So that Lonely Island digital short, with happening at the same time as the rise of digital video hosting and distribution and accessibility, really took them up a notch, right? Like introduced them to that next generation of viewers, and that was kind of like the passing of the torch in a way, right? But you said something that made me, thinking about Jay Farrow, Pete Davidson, who came from stand-up, and you've got your Chris Farley's, Will Ferrell's, Amy Poehler's, who came from sketch, who came from Second City, who came from Groundlings. They came from environments which are based around sketches, writing the sketches, performing the sketches night in, night out, with a team. So I think when you look, and I get your comparison in that you've got someone who, Jay Farrow can stand up in a comedy club with a mic and do impressions, and like this is what would happen if Jay-Z went shopping at Kmart, and he can do that with his voices, and he can guide that whole thing. He doesn't need anybody around him. So that whole thing about plugging into the rest of the cast or into the sketch, the way that Jay was utilized was really set him up in an environment where he can come in, do the impression, and then leave. Or there was a time when he was Obama, and he was sitting at the desk, and he would do his impression. Someone would come in, interact with him, leave. Someone else would come in, interact with him, leave. It was built around that, but you hardly ever saw him in a sketch where he wasn't an impression, right? It was all based around his strengths and stuff like that. So similarly, Pete, who came, I think he was 15, 16 when he started doing stand up in clubs and stuff around New York. He didn't have that training that Chris Farley, Tim Meadows, Mike Myers coming from, Second City and everything like that. So I think it's a different space. It's something that David Spade has talked a lot about, because he came from stand up and he came in with a whole bunch of people that were stand up. He came in with Farley, Sandler, Chris Rock, all stand-ups. So they kind of like palled around together and then just wrote things for each other that make each other laugh, and they had Farley to kind of anchor that whole presence thing. Let's just put Farley in a sketch in a dress. Let's just put Farley in a sketch with his shirt off. And at the time, hindsight is really something, right? Because now we look at that, at least I look at that and be like, that was one of the great golden ages of SNL. But people hated it at the time. Like 92 through 95, critics, this is the worst. This is awful. This is a boys club. They're just trying to make each other laugh. It's like, well, no crap.
As someone who's paid attention to my lived experience with SNL is like from maybe the tail end of that era, but I was still 10, right?
Yeah,
and so
right.
my perception is different. Really, like early 2000s is where I think I enter the demographic that SNL is for, I think.
Yeah.
In as a high schooler into young adult, and then, gosh, I'm trying to think about like what Will Ferrell's more probably like my staple. Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, like those are the characters I think about. But like, have contemporary critics for the whatever contemporary season, have they ever lauded SNL as like this is a watershed moment in like did they do that for Eddie Murphy? Did they do that for like the original cast?
Certainly for the original cast, right? Because this was brand new. This is a phenomenon, especially that first season, right? Belushi and Chevy Chase and Aykroyd and Gilda Radner and Jane Curtin and Lorraine Newman and Garrett Morris.
What are their backgrounds? Like, as you're thinking about them,
I believe that they all came from either Second City or something like it. That's my understanding. Is none of them were stand-up comedians. All of them were sketch-based players, right? Mm-hmm. Which, if you're building a sketch show, you grab from sketch talent, right? And then I think as Chevy left, I think that maybe the critics, and keep in mind, this is all just off the top of my head and probably needs to be fact checked, but I feel like after the first couple of seasons, it sort of waned down a little bit in as far as critical acclaim, and then went back up again when Eddie Murphy hit big, right? So you had Eddie Murphy and you had Joe Piscopo, probably 83 to 85, somewhere around there. That's when he has meteoric rise, and he kind of like carried it on his back, and I think people really liked that, and he became the biggest movie star after leaving there, right? And he did stand up as well, but I want to say that his stand up was after his rise on SNL. At least I know that like Delirious and Raw were post SNL, but that is a good question. I do not know that. And then I think that there's moments throughout that have been of high critical acclaim, where talking about the handling of the first show after 9/11. Different moments and I think a lot of them are probably politically based, because that's when people watch it the most, when there's debates, when there's an election, people wanting to, and I'm guilty of this as well. It might hurt your social studies brain, but I got my news from the way that it was portrayed in comedy on SNL, on late night talk shows, because in order for them to touch on it, they have to capture the essence of it. They have to understand it really, really well. And it's like, okay, how do we make NAFTA funny? Okay, well, we're just going to distill this down to this part. We're going to do this really goofy impression of Ross Perot, and we're going to talk about it in layman's terms. And that's how I learned about a lot of things, like the Dukakis Bush election was about the time that I was really, really starting to watch SNL. And it's funny that you say that the late or the early 2000s is kind of like that era for you, because like there's a theory that whoever the cast was during your middle school years, the years that you're kind of forming your sense of humor, your comedic preferences and stuff like that, is going to be your favorite, because that's who introduced you to that sort of style and stuff. So for me, I was in middle school, probably 89 to 92, around that era. So in there is Phil Hartman, Mike Myers, Dana Carvey, and then transitioning to the Farley years, Sandler, Spade, Rock, Rob Schneider. That's my, when I had sleepovers at my buddy's house, when we would stay up and watch it, that's what we were watching. Wayne's World and the Gap Girls and, Motivational Speaker. That was like glory days for me. And a lot of that is nostalgia. A lot of that is affinity for the time, where I was in life as a middle schooler. And that's probably similar for you when you became cognizant of the show and Will Ferrell and Tina Fey and all of that cast, because you're a little bit younger than me. That probably aligns to your at least middle schoolish, early high school days, where you're sort of forming your sense of humor. Does that track?
I graduated high school in 2003.
In 2003. Okay.
So most of, I would say, from probably not exactly. It would be maybe late 90s, but I'm thinking 2002, 2003 into 2006.
Yeah.
Into that space where I would say I would watch more SNL when I was in college than I did elsewhere. And part of that, this kind of speaks to how media is consumed, right? YouTube comes about in 2000,
06, 07.
Isn't YouTube earlier than that? Is it not around in the early 2000s? Let's see.
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it was started as its own entity and then bought by Google, and in around 06, 07. I think that's pretty close.
Okay. I won't waste too much time.
What does Siri say?
2005. February 14th, 2005. I think that I didn't watch a ton of SNL, and it's not because I was banned from watching SNL. I remember watching. did Mad TV come on before SNL, like a half hour before, or was it a half
Oh.
hour after?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you meant chronologically. In terms of how it would air, kind of in the 90s, was Mad TV would start on Fox at 11, and SNL comes on at 11:30. So and Mad TV was an hour-long show. It was either watch the news at 11 or watch Mad TV until SNL started. So there were quite a few times where I'd watch the first half hour of Mad TV until SNL started.
I kind of liked Mad TV, more of the Stewart sketch, and
Yes.
The Lowered Expectations, I think, was Mad TV, or was that SNL?
I think it was Mad TV.
Yeah, I think it was Mad TV. There's more. There's not more, but there's some Mad TV sketches that are really memorable to me in the 90s. Anyway, like, I wouldn't watch every weekend because Saturday night was hockey night in Canada, and I would watch a doubleheader. I would watch hockey from 7 until like 12:30, and then and if I caught parts of those things, it was like I was checking. I would switch back and forth and stuff like that. But I couldn't. The way I consume SNL now, and really it's because of you that I watch consistently every week. But I'm not watching it at 11:30 on Saturday night. I'm usually watching it on Sunday evening after my kids go to bed.
Yeah.
So I'm able to like you're able to curate stuff now, and I think that I'm consuming more than I ever have, but it's not those singular moments that you had. I think that Amy Poehler and Tina Fey and where's Will Ferrell fall in the chronological?
Yeah, I think he started in 95, and then but as like a bit player, right? And it was like sort of the transition for like the last of the early 90s guys. I think Spade was like the last remaining, because Farley and Sandler got fired in 94 or 95, and Chris Rock left to go to In Living Color, which then got canceled shortly after that. And then Spade and Norm Macdonald, I think Norm got fired actually before that, but Spade was kind of like the last holdover, where he was kind of there, and kind of like Pete Davidson this past year, where like he was in the cast but only showed up bits and pieces here and there. But that's when Will Ferrell, Chris Kattan, Sherry O'Terry, Molly Shannon, Jim Brewer, that whole cast sort of took off a little bit, right? Mid 90s, because that's like, I went to college the fall of 96, and it was like, oh, and Fallon, right? Jimmy Fallon. So the latter half of the 90s into 2000, which 2000 ushered in, I think, that's when you saw Tina Fey taking over as head writer and doing Update. So that,
That's what I remember. And I remember that part. So it is a little later than what you suggested. I wasn't in middle school. But I remember tuning in for that. And I think that part of that was in our dorm room we had 3 or 4 tube TVs.
Yes.
Like we would all bring our TVs, and then we would all line them up next to each other and get splitters, and then like watch things on multiple screens.
Like a sports bar.
Yeah, you'd mute the sports because you don't need to hear it, and then you'd have a video game going on one, and then
probably naked ladies on one. Yeah,
on one, definitely. Underwater porn was a frequent
That was a whole genre back at that time.
when you watch porn with people versus when you watch porn by yourself, you watch different kinds of porn, right?
Sure.
Underwater porn was
Yeah.
something that had a lot of comedic value, and you could kind of I don't know, you could that's a whole
Yeah.
that's a whole episode talking about
For
that.
sure.
But, like, just the psychology of, like, when you're watching it with others for not having the purpose of, like, being stimulated by it, but
Yeah.
it's still a product that's intended to do that. So it's doing that, but you're not leading with that on the surface in your conversation, especially in, like, a really, like, heteronormative, like not, I wouldn't say, like we were like, we weren't misogynists or anything like that, but it's just it was a weird thing. It was a weird thing, but I remember, I have memories of laughing hysterically and then, like, providing commentary on, like, why doesn't she have her floaties? She clearly does not have good form with that stroke. And so, yeah, it's
Our viewers doubled in the past 30 seconds. So that is fascinating. We'll have to tackle that at another time. I want to bring it back to Twitter real quick, because this I think helps show my shift. So, ready for an awkward transition? Let's go.
Do you intentionally cut yourself off every time you do that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Why
Go
not?
ahead.
Okay. All right. So there was my Mac is not allowing me to share my screen, so that makes it a little challenging. So talk amongst yourselves while I try to figure this out. You know what? Forget it. It's not that good. Well,
I forget Sarah Silverman was on SNL for a season.
for one season, yeah.
Yeah. Sarah Silverman was on SNL for the same amount of time as Sarah Sherman.
That's true. Yeah, she's only on for one season there.
And then Paul Schaefer was on SNL.
Yeah, he was on really early on. Paul Schaefer, the
from Letterman.
Letterman, yeah. Okay.
I'm talking amongst myself by looking at cast members that surprised me that were there. And then I think of Chris Rock. Chris Rock was only on 3 seasons, but I think of Chris Rock as being like a mainstay for whatever reason. Like, I thought Jay Farrow only had a cup of tea, but like double the amount of time as Chris Rock.
Interesting. Well, unfortunately, I can't share my screen, which was the whole reason I had all of these things, screenshots queued up and everything. But what I did was I did a screenshot of a couple of tweets that I saw. One of them is comparing Pete Davidson to a sandwich that they had. Looks a lot like him. It was funny. We'll get past that. The other one is it's an interview with Jack Harlow. You know Jack Harlow?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's Post Malone without the face tattoos. He had this quote that said, "Pete's appeal to the world has everything to do with his authenticity. He doesn't try to hide the person that he is. We don't have another one of him." And so Jack Harlow a rapper, in case you don't know, became close with Pete Davidson, I think after he had been a musical guest on the show, and befriended Pete, and they had hung out ever since or whatever. And so this is a BuzzFeed article that I kind of skimmed and stuff like that. But I think what he was saying is that people end up really, really liking him and becoming very enamored with him because he's so authentic. He is nothing if not himself, very comfortable in his skin, and very comfortable opening up, like you said, about his challenges with depression, with, I think he has Crohn's disease, right? With, just a lot, and a lot of it, coming from his father being killed on 9/11, right? And then it also goes into, like, how have all of these beautiful women fallen in love with this, this guy? It's like, well, he is super authentic. He is super kind and caring. And, when I first started, like, turning the corner on liking him, was, a little bit ago, a couple of months ago, when Kanye was putting all these tweets out about what he called Skeet. Instead of calling him Pete, they called him Skeet, disparaging messages about Pete Davidson and everything like that, once it became public that he was dating Kim Kardashian. And Pete's response to this was, hey man, I've been where you are. I struggle with mental health issues. I really think you should get some help. I really think that you should, look into medication because it's helped me phenomenally. If you want any help, I'm available. I'd be happy to talk to you about this stuff. But stop putting your ex-wife and your kids into a frenzy and anxiety over this behavior. I was like, that was, what is he, 20, 28, 29, 30, something like that. Very mature response, I think, to someone doing animations of cutting off your head and publicly berating you, right? Antagonizing you, buying the house across the street from you to keep an eye on you, not normal behavior. So that just reinforces what this article says, just about everyone just thinking he is like this super real dude, super kind, caring, compassionate person. So for me, if you're a good person, that's what matters the most to me, right? Is, are you a good person? In terms of the SNL aspect of it, because I still do believe that he wasn't fully involved in the sketches very much, right? Most of his time on the show was doing update appearances where he's himself, basically doing a monologue, a stand-up, whatever, or videos where he's playing like the Chad character. Okay, cool, which I think you really like.
Which is a good bit, and
it's a good bit, yeah.
I think that there's so that the bits that have sound bites like that, like what's brilliant about that one is I will do that to anybody. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Julie said I told Julie that I was doing this today and that we're doing Pete Davidson, and she goes, okay, we'll make sure that you tell Brandon that that like Pete, like Pete advocates for mental health, and that's a good thing. And,
for sure.
And I said, okay.
Did she realize what you were doing?
It took her a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry
Rad.
for railing you.
Cool. No. So after the finale, last Saturday, Pete's last show, A.D. Bryant's last show, Kyle Mooney's last show, Kate McKinnon's last show, they kind of do, a piece on every one of them and what they've meant to the show and everything like that. And there's a lot of heightened attention around the whole thing. And on the topic of Pete, I don't know if this was an interview or someone writing up about him, but it was He was saying that, this is Pete, that oh, well, you know what? I think this was part of the Weekend Update bit that he did as his farewell. Lauren himself said, I don't know that this is going to work, but let's fail together. Because he knew he came from a stand-up background. And he knew that that was his thing, but there was something about him that he liked, and he wanted to put him on the show, right? And so he said, let's try it out. That changes the context for me. You know, if Lauren is saying, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try it. And there's something about you that I like, and it may not fit with what we're doing here, but, you know, we've taken chances on different types of personalities in the past, and why not give it a try? I like you, you know? So that changes my mind in terms of what to expect from him, right? If you bring in a relief pitcher for a baseball team, you're not expecting him to start. You're expecting him to do a very specific thing. And if you're okay with that, and you're both on the same page as a manager and a player, okay, we're just going to come in and have you be the relief pitcher, playing a specific role. You know, he doesn't have the skill set of an impressionist or a sketch player or anything like that. And that's that. If I were in a room with him and I said, hey man, I just don't think that you were really good in sketches, he would say, yes, I agree. That is not my strong suit. That's why I do update. That's why I do the digital shorts where I'm either a really dumb character or I'm a rapper and I rap about NFTs or, you know, Lauren or whatever it is. So that changes my perception.
I bet he might even like not you say he's not a good player, and he might say I agree, and end it at that. Like,
Yeah.
I think that his personality is not one where he feels he needs to defend himself.
No.
And say, but I bring all these to the table. Like
Sure.
That's
true.
That's what Pete is not perfect. But what you see in Pete is like these peaks of greatness, like these and they're wrapped up in his uniqueness, right?
Yeah.
It's not, you know, I compared him to Jay Farrow. Jay Farrow's a hell of an impressionist, and
Big time.
and has like a specific skill there. Pete's is softer. Pete is more about like playing around and finding pockets. It's hard to describe exactly what it is about him. And what you said about Lauren saying I don't, let's take a flyer, like that does make a lot of sense, because like I can't tell you what Pete is, and I can't tell you what Pete was for that.
Yeah.
It's more of a feeling for me that I just like I appreciate that he's there.
Yeah.
I never leave a skit or an update desk monologue or anything going, you know what, that was like the most amazing sketch or bit ever. But like just these peaks of like, but he really did have me with these three jokes that he landed.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it was like a really funny acquaintance, and you're with them at a party or a get together or something like that, and they entertain you, and they're just being themselves and being funny, and you leave that interaction being like, I like that person, you know. And I think in those appearances on Update or, you know, talk shows or whatever, I think you kind of get a little bit of that feeling of like, well, I don't know what that, you can't really put it into a box, but I liked it. I laughed. I enjoyed myself.
You know, from a person standpoint, I'm just shifting a little bit. You know, when he was like it was a question if he was going to show up for shows. Like he was at a low point with mental health, and he's still a somewhat private person. Like he wasn't living his life like wide out in the open.
Yeah.
But there was some like legitimate like what's going on with this guy, and like he's not He's not talented enough to be worth it anyway. It's a lot of BS. Like, who does he think he is? Like really, it was at a time where I think that, we're still at a shaky time of like understanding mental health and having empathy for
Sure.
people when they go through things. But like that was not perfect, right? And
No.
but there was also no like spin about it. There was no and it was there was no urgency to come. I believe I remember him addressing it on an update,
Yeah.
like a couple times, right? But it's like there wasn't an effort for like controlling the narrative. It was just like, this is what I'm going through, and other people go through this all the time, and people can show up one way one day and show up a different way the next day.
Yeah.
And they're still the same person. But like people are erratic. Like we all are different
Yeah.
versions of ourselves during day to day and different eras of our lives. And I think that for me, knowing people like Pete, and then like let's be honest, like I see myself in Pete. I think that a lot of people can see. You might not think that you're exactly like Pete, but like that's why I like Pete. Is I see him in me, I see him in the people around me, and I see this beautiful imperfection that we all have, and him being not a symbol, because like he's not on a pedestal. It's just it helps you to think. It helps you to think about how you show up for yourself and how you show up for others. And I think that to me is the biggest selling point that I can give you on like why you should like Pete.
Yeah. Well, and I think that culminating weekend update appearance, I think is kind of what solidified it for me and put the nail in the coffin, because all of those things that you just mentioned, right? He while he has the spotlight on him for his personal life, because of who he dates and stuff like that, he is using that to shine a light on mental health, shine a light on first responders, that kind of stuff. And I think in that final update piece, he said, and he could hear his voice shaking a little bit and stuff, and saying, Lorne changed my life. This show changed my life. This cast changed my life. And you allowed me the time that I needed when I was at my lowest point, when I was struggling with substance abuse, when I was struggling with mental health issues. You allowed me the time away to take care of that. Flashback 20 years ago, 25 years ago even, nobody did that for Farley, right? Farley, in major snowball, 8-ball, him struggling with that, and everyone saying, I'm worried about him. Okay, we can't have him on the show. And so that he was kicked off from the show for a time. He was prevented. He was supposed to host, and they're like, I don't know what's going to happen. You should watch the monologue when he hosted, and they're talking about, in the monologue, having Chris Rock on standby in case something happens and Chris has to take over. And so it's incredibly interesting and terribly sad to watch now, knowing the kind of the behind the scenes aspect of it. So all to say, they gave him the space to do that. And throughout this whole season, there were many episodes where Pete wasn't even there, right? Maybe he did like a pre-filmed remote or something like that. But the assumption, I guess, maybe even from me or from whoever, is, oh, he's too busy living the life in California with his very famous, very rich girlfriend, blah, blah, blah. we don't know that, right? That's just assumption. And what he, I think, all but confirmed in that final update piece is, I was given the space when I needed to step back and take care of my mental health. And I thank Lorne, and I thank the cast, and I thank the crew for allowing me to do that, because I wouldn't be where I am today if I had to go on despite struggling with all the things I was struggling with, right? Something that never happened for Chris Farley. Chris Farley never turned off, right? He, even when they begged him, please go get help, please go get help. Nope, gotta do the show, you know? So there's talking about the mental health and sort of the reasons behind his sporadic appearances over the years. Contextualizes the whole thing, makes me totally where my preconceived notion, my bias against him may have been like, oh man, you're too cool to do this. You got, some rapper you want to hang out with instead of coming to work on Saturday. And come to find out, he may have just had to take a mental health break. He may have had complications from his chronic disease. He may have had, personal things going on. We should all have that affordance to us, to take a step back from work when those things happen. And just because it's a beloved TV show doesn't change the fact that when you're low, you can't perform. When you're, in those spaces, you shouldn't be with 3 cameras on you and a live audience of millions, right? So that, combined with knowing what a genuine, kind, caring, like all of the people that are close to him speak very, very highly of what a kind and compassionate person he is. So when you consider his character, when you consider a little bit of insight into all of the things he's been struggling with while he's been on the show for the past 9 years. That's a long time, Not a lot of people make it 9 years. And then seeing that he's able to do, some of these things changes my whole perception on what he did do, right? And have compassion for him and believe in him as a seemingly good guy, So
yeah.
that was the final piece that I needed to, to assemble like the whole picture and say, oh man, I've been all wrong about him. He's been an advocate for many different things. He's been nothing but true to himself. He's had the leeway from his boss to not have to be in sketches in the same way that everyone else is, not have to come to work when he's struggling with his mental health. And you know what? There may even be an aspect of it of there is such a circus surrounding him right now that being there takes away from the show, right? All of the other cast members who are busting their butt every week, staying up all night writing and tweaking the sketches and stuff like that. And then he just shows up and the crowd just goes bonkers when he steps out. Maybe there's a bit of like, I don't want to do that to the rest of them. I don't want to take the shine from the rest of them who are here working hard.
Your story about Lorne was there when Farley was there too, correct?
Yeah. He was there for all but 5 years. I think 80 to 85 maybe.
It's interesting that the differences in how that played out, and some of it's Farley and Davidson are different people, and some of it is the timing, like where society was and what perceptions were and what expectations were, but the common thing is the same boss. Yep. And I think what incredible leadership. That's not something that definitely not. I grew up thinking that perfect attendance at school was important, and taking sick days was not an option when you get into the workforce.
Yeah.
And that your ability to show up and contribute for the entirety of your shift, because you always have to be working like everybody's watching. You always have to be playing this game like it's the Super Bowl. You've always got to be your best. And you give your all, right? You give your entire self.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's so not good. That does not equal greatness. There's not one path. There's not one attendance model. There's not one skill set to greatness. Right. There's not one way to manage people, and there's no such thing as everyone gets the same and that's fair.
Yeah.
Do you think that those cast members were the jealousy or envy or feeling of unfairness is human, and they're entitled to feel that way. But what a great public, and I guess I didn't even really think about it with Lauren, but you should treat Pete differently than A.D. Bryant.
Yeah.
And you can provide leadership in ways that helps them to perform great for the show, and achieve professional, work towards professional happiness for themselves.
Yeah.
And I feel like both of those people did that, and they did it in very different ways. A.D. Bryant was in a majority of sketches for most of her time with SNL.
Yeah.
And a star of many of them, and a really good supporting player in the rest of them.
For sure.
And was probably there. I mean, I don't know about 80's story. Was 80 there working the same shift doing what everyone else did, and the late night sessions and writing and doing all that.
I do think towards the end she was able to step away for her Hulu show, right? And then that's another thing. So you talk about Lauren allowing them to do that. That wasn't always the case, because I listened to the Dana Carvey, David Spade podcast about SNL, where they talk to former cast members, former writers, and former hosts of the show, just talking about their experiences and stuff. And then they give insight as to their time. And what Spade said was that didn't happen during our time. When we were shooting Tommy Boy, we would do our show for SNL in New York through the week. As soon as the show was over, Farley and I were on a plane to Toronto to shoot through the weekend on Tommy Boy, and then fly back on Tuesday for the next week of SNL. He's like, the whole fact that people are allowed to take time off to go do a movie, to go do a TV show, whatever, he's like, that just didn't happen back then. So you can see things have changed, and maybe as he's grown older, Lauren has been more accustomed to that. But he went through that with Belushi, right? Watching Belushi implode. He started seeing the same thing with Farley and tried to stop and saying, hey, the most important thing to him is being on the show. We're not going to let him be on the show unless he cleans it up. And what happened, Not to say that that's the same situation with Pete, right? But I think all things accounted for, it just shows okay, we have a business to run, we have a show to run, but it doesn't do any good if they're dead. It doesn't do any good if they're not functional. So we have a large enough cast to accommodate for these kinds of fluctuations, and we're going to roll with it, and make the best show we can. There's a saying in SNL, we don't go on because we're ready. We go on because it's 11:30. Right? Which, there's a lot of that we can apply to our lives, right?
Right.
Do the best you can every single day with what you can.
It's a good lesson in leadership regardless. It's you're not going, people are not jello. They're not gonna all fit perfectly into the slots that we have, and we're not born to be employees.
Right.
We're not born to give our time to earn money, and especially like in creative fields, but even in in all, making sandwiches at Subway.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the same, and that's okay. And if you can be thoughtful about how to maximize what you've got and to understand what you've got, you're not a pushover by managing people differently, in order to find balance and success for the collective whole.
Yeah.
You just have to have the you have to be able to see that vision, and you have to be comfortable with others potentially being uncomfortable with how you're doing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're gonna make the wrong play, but it's like you have to be people first, and you have to do things like that in order to, like, I'm sitting here thinking I don't know all the details about it, so it's not a well thought out theory, and I'll just put it out there. But like, does 2022 Lorne help Farley come back from the edge a little bit more than mid 90s Lorne?
Yeah.
Does 2022 Lorne make a difference in what Belushi does?
I bet you he asks him that all the time. I bet you he thinks about that all the time.
Yeah.
Could I have done something differently? And, we all learn from our mistakes, and we're better for it, right?
Yeah. And that's not a you should have done something, Lauren, but it's more focusing on like the growth, the clear growth that's there, and just the humanity of like he of a lot of people in professional stature has almost zero reason to change.
Yeah.
But clearly he does. And that's that's
sure.
commendable and deserves to be celebrated.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be many books and stories and articles and stuff to come out about this, which I would have to assume is the twilight of his career. So
he's got at least another 50 years.
I think he's like 75 or something.
He'll get 50 more.
They always do.
They'll have a 20-year retirement after that.
That's right. Canadians don't retire, man. So let's go to our tentpole question here. This ended up being a much deeper discussion than I anticipated, which is fantastic, because I think it was really I got to flex my SNL trivia, because there are a lot of occasions where that comes up, and so like someone who's got several books that I've read and followed for a long time, there's payoff there and satisfaction. But I have a Trivial Pursuit SNL edition that I've only played once, because I played it with family, and I went the whole turn around and won before they could even play it, and nobody's played it with me since. So,
the stuff that is like so far beyond what a trivia can be distilled into a trivia game. Like just like the fluency of like all of like the memoirs and the behind the scenes stuff and the just like the firsthand experience of watching it as a regular like viewer for so much time, and not even just a viewer, but like you studied it. It was your it was your like it was your thing. So you ripped it apart and have varying opinions and perspectives on different things. So it's I don't go to Wikipedia about that stuff. I just like I had a Wikipedia list of things, and all I was doing was like, oh, like who, like tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was my goal was to be on there, you know.
Yeah.
I was borderline obsessive about it, you know.
Another 50 years to
that's right.
get on there.
That's right. My buddies on my improv group would quiz me and say, you know, this was like around the time where it was on Comedy Central every day, the repeats from the 90s and stuff like that. And they would say, okay, I'm watching an episode with Patrick Stewart, who's a musical guest, and I would say, Salt and Pepper, because that's who it was. So that was a fun game. Only for me, because it was not entertaining to anyone else. But yeah, man.
Who was the host when Tupac was the musical guest?
He was never the musical guest.
He wasn't?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No. I've also kind of fallen behind in upkeep of that stuff, because as the 2010s and 2020s have gone on, I don't even know who the musical guests are. Like the lady who was on last week with Natasha Lyonne, Japanese Breakfast they're called, have never heard that name ever uttered in my life. So difficult. I mean, you want to talk about Blind Melon? Okay, I can talk about Blind Melon and Blues Traveler all day, but it's becoming a lost art for me as time has gone on, and my memory has faded. But yeah, man. I think what's core to this is what you said in that clip that we started off this episode with back in 2018 when we first started talking about it. Is I like that you said yet. I like that you said you don't think Pete Davidson is there yet, which means there's room for growth, which means there's room for change. And not only for him as a performer, but me as some jabroni who's watching this and commentating on it as if I had any sort of connection to it, right? At least like a professional one. You know, that's growth on my part, for sure, is to say, like, hey, recognize the humanity in this person. You know, recognize that there is good being done here. Just because it doesn't fit into your cookie cutter vision of what it should be, well, then you wouldn't have had Farley. Then you wouldn't have had Norm Macdonald on Update, you know? There's a lot that I think doesn't appeal to the previous generations. And I think I'm probably old enough now that I am of a different generation than the current cast. Well, many of them, right? Not Kenan Thompson. But
is Kenan older than you?
He's not older than me, but he's been on for 20 years. So he's closer in age, I will say.
I think that's so cool. I think that's so cool.
Heck yeah, man. Absolutely. So, yeah, I value kindness and I value character, pretty much above all. And for unilaterally, except for Kanye West, people to say what a good human, what a kind, caring, compassionate person this guy is, immediately changes my attitude towards him, right? People say that about Tom Hanks. Everyone likes Tom Hanks, right? He gets unlimited grace because he is Tom Hanks, right? And I think in smaller circles, when it comes to the comedy world, when it specifically this show, he gets grace because they all care about him as a person. They let him have time off. They let him do the things that he excels at and stick to only that, and not have an expectation that he's going to be in a Conehead sketch or a Wayne's World or something like that that isn't in his wheelhouse. Totally changes my perspective on what I feel like it should be. It has to be in order to maintain the integrity of the show. Got to back up off that. It's not my show, you know. I feel like I have ownership over it, but it can change and evolve over time. I watched some of the 70s sketches. They don't appeal to me at all. I don't even think many of them are funny, right? The people are dressed as bumblebees and singing. That's not funny. But in the 70s, that was hilarious. Maybe it was the 8 balls, but...
I get the same feeling watching the 70s shows as I do when I watch Seinfeld. It's like I know that this is supposed to be hilarious, and I know it's supposed to be profound. I'm just like I'm not sinking.
Yeah.
I'm not sinking up. Give me Chippendale. Like,
Did you watch that? Did you watch the Chippendale movie?
Oh, I haven't done. I was talking about the Chippendale skit. Farley, but yeah. I want to watch Chippendale.
Oh, it's excellent. It's excellent.
That's on the list.
For sure.
Those cartoons, yeah. That'd be another episode.
A lot of good fan service in that movie.
Comparing our childhood cartoons, although like you might be into some like my taste in SNL stuff is like later, but like 80s cartoons are where it's at, and that's
heck yeah.
That's your wheelhouse too. That's
you
the era of cartoons.
You will appreciate Chippendale for that nostalgic aspect, and there's lots of cameos they pull in there, and also it's John Mulaney and Andy Samberg doing the voices.
And you can't go wrong with that. I love.
You can't go wrong. That's my John Mulaney.
John Mulaney is brilliant as a comic, but like it's similar like with just the struggles and the openness that I appreciate too. Like there's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah,
anyway,
for sure. And they're friends.
You were saying you were wrong about Pete, and that you've grown. Your heart has grown 5 sizes.
Maybe 2.
2 sizes?
Maybe just 2. Yeah.
2.5.
That's it.
And
that's about it. But yeah,
you're coming down off of Mount Crumpet, your mountain of perfection, SNL perfection, and you're coming down to Whoville with the rest of us who just take the good, the bad, the ugly with SNL and just try to appreciate it for what it is.
You take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life. Probably before your time, but anywho, yeah, man. Well, thanks for this conversation and allowing me to kind of unpackage that and sort of come to terms with I think that, and we've touched upon this like in other episodes and even in personal conversations, there is sort of like a hipsterish mentality that I have, a snootiness about comedy, specifically SNL, that doesn't serve anyone, and I think it, like, holding on to it as part of my identity has been, it's just been kind of like a thing for me, and sort of as I mature, letting go of that and being like, man, why are you so worried? Why do you care so much? Just enjoy things. Just enjoy things.
I'm proud of you.
Thanks, man. I'm proud of me too.
Have a good weekend.
All right, man. Well, thank you for joining us. If you're watching this live or on demand, we'll have to have our friend Mr. Keaty make us like Seinfeld, because I think that's a difficult thing to do, especially a lot of it doesn't hold up, I would argue. And that's an unpopular opinion, but we'll save that for another day. So until next time, I'm Brandon.
I'm Jeff.
That's Jeff. Pretty much got it that time. So, all right. Have a great... Ow! Take it easy. Take care.